Merry Christmas, everyone. We're here to celebrate the birth of our Savior, Jesus Christ. As we reflect on this Christmas, we have to admit this is new, unlike any Christmas that we've ever celebrated before, because this whole year has been quite unusual, unique in a way. And so perhaps we can look at this Christmas with new eyes and even our readings and try to get new insight from it, because the readings are very familiar, especially that first reading from Isaiah chapter 62. We hear it all the time. Christmas songs, Christmas cards, Handel's Messiah. So let's look again at this first reading, in fact, all the readings, see what Lord might be telling us in this most unusual Christmas. So the first reading, Isaiah wrote around 700 years before the birth of Christ. Talks about a people who walked in darkness, who lived in a land of deep darkness. And that's because they were being attacked by enemies. Assyria would come down and defeat the northern 10 tribes. Babylon would come and defeat the southern 2 tribes and bring them into captivity. So this was the darkest time in Israel's history. And yet, we have this first reading. Because Isaiah goes on to say, the people who walked in darkness have seen not just a light, but a great light. A light that they'd never seen before. And it says God multiplied the nation and its joy, a joy that they had never experienced before. And the prophet Isaiah also talks about the oppression that they experienced while in captivity. It was a nightmare. He uses 3 images to capture the intensity of the oppression: the yoke of their burden, the bar across their shoulder, the rod of their oppressor. And yet, now, all of these instruments of oppression are broken, smashed. The people are free, a freedom they never knew before. Why? Because they had never experienced such oppression and such darkness. This was a new beginning for Israel. Why? And this is especially, I think, at the heart of this first reading. Not only were they released from captivity and they go back to Jerusalem, but Isaiah says a child has been born, a son given. So wondrous is the birth that 4 names are needed to express the magnitude of the event. And these are 4 superlative titles with double designations, combining aspects of both divinity and humanity. So not just counselor, but wonderful counselor. Not just God, but mighty God. Not just Father, but everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. That's the first reading. How does it apply to us? Can we say that we have experienced darkness this past year? Absolutely. Even deep darkness. Especially the vulnerable, the poor, the aged, those in nursing homes, the sick with underlying conditions. Joy, for a lot of people, was taken away this past year. Can we say there's been oppression? Yes. Those burdened with loneliness and isolation, anxiety, depression, addiction, and the yoke of economic hardship as well. And so, the rod, the yoke was there. And yet, we're here for Christmas. Because Christ is the light of the world. As St. John says in his 4th Gospel prologue, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And to the oppressed, Jesus says in his ministry, this is a quote from the Gospel of Matthew, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. You will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So perhaps we can experience Christmas in a totally new way that we've not experienced before, nor tried before, maybe taken things for granted. And because we bear his name, because we call ourselves Christians, may we be the light of the world to a hurting world and bring joy and hope to those still burdened and oppressed. How? The last line of today's first reading gives us a great clue. Isaiah says, "The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this." So it's a work of God. It's his zeal in us, if we're open to it. And that's what St. Paul is getting at in that second reading, his letter to Titus. "Beloved," he says, "because the grace of God appeared, bringing salvation to all, be zealous for good deeds." In other words, the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. Be zealous. And why not? We've experienced the darkness. We've experienced lack of joy in many ways. Let us take on this new ministry. We turn to the gospel, and it says when it came time for Mary to give birth, there was no room in the inn. Everything was in lockdown. Have we experienced this past year? Yes. After these masses on Christmas, yet again, the churches will be locked down. So what did the Holy Family do in those circumstances? They found an alternate location for the birth of Jesus. What do we need to do? Make room for Jesus. May our hearts not be in lockdown mode, but invite Jesus in a new way into our hearts. He may find comfort there. And Jesus said in the book of Revelation, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in, and I will dine with them, and they with me." So that's the challenge for this Christmas. It's a new Christmas, but it has lots of possibilities, great possibilities. And I'll simply close with this quotation from a wonderful song put out by a Christian group called Casting Crowns, called simply "Make Room." And I'll simply quote the lyrics. "Family hiding from the storm found no place at the keeper's door. It was for this a child was born, to save a world so cold and hollow. The sleeping town did not know that lying in a manger low, a Savior King, who had no home, has come to heal our sorrows. Is there room in your heart? Is there room in your heart? Is there room in your heart for God to write his story? Shepherds counting sheep at night, do not fear the glory light. You are precious in his sight. God has come to raise the lowly. Is there room in your heart? Is there room in your heart? Is there room in your heart for God to write his story? You can come as you are, but it may set you apart when you make room in your heart and trade your dreams for his glory. Make room in your heart. Make room in your heart for God to write his story.